YouTube. We're live on YouTube 341, and then I will be going to this one here. Also on Facebook Live as well. All right, greetings everyone, and welcome to this evening's session. We're having COVID vaccines conversations right here at the Jamaica Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm really grateful to everyone that have decided to be part of this conversation. Want to thank Dr. Anton Ray, Elder Floyd Mitchell, for the tremendous work they have done as members of the Safety Task Force for putting this together. And we are delighted to have our guest with us. And so, without any further ado, I will be turning things over to Dr. Ray, who will be chairing the program and also be presenting to us. So welcome to everyone that is on. Right, Dr. Ray, go right ahead, please.
Great, thanks, Pastor. So I would like to extend a special welcome to our very special guests, and I will introduce them momentarily, just to give you some information about their credentials before they do their presentation. Now, each person will give a presentation, and then at the end we will have some time set aside for questions. Now, our first guest speaker is Dr. Laverne Bent, who is a graduate of Stanford University and is currently an associate professor of medicine at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And her interests include the management of pain and infection control. She's also married to Dr. Colin Bruce, who's an economist, and she's the mother of two adult children, Savan and Colin Jr. She's also yours truly, big sister. At least in Guyana, we would say big sister. Here we would say older sister. And our other two special guests are Dr. Ajoa Smalls Manti, and she is a physician and a scientist. She is a medical doctor, and she also has a PhD in the study of immunology. Now, Dr. Ajoa received her PhD at Oxford University and her MD degree at Columbia University in New York. Her specialized field of study was immunology, and at that time she worked on HIV diseases. However, now she speaks very much so about the COVID disease because that's her expertise in the field of how the body defends itself, or immunology. And she will be giving us a presentation, which I very much look forward to also. And our final, last but not least, is Dr. Norma Smalls Manti, who is the mother of Ajoa Manti and Smalls Manti, and she specializes in the care of patients who are in the intensive care units with illnesses that are so severe that they're alive only because they're on life support. In other words, these patients are critically ill or injured, and she's been doing this for many years. She is the first African-American female in America to earn these credentials of being board certified in surgical critical care. And also, importantly, she was inducted as a fellow of the American College of Critical Care and also a fellow of the American College of Surgeons. She now practices at Howard University Hospital in Washington, D.C. She is also an associate professor of surgery and has multiple responsibilities. She teaches medical students, and she also teaches residents in surgery. to help them be in the field of surgery. So this is the bio of our three special guests, and we look so forward to them educating us and informing us about this terrible pandemic that we've been experiencing. Many of you know that there's lots of misinformation out there, and especially amongst Adventist circles. It's amazing to me how much so it exists amongst Adventist circles. And now we have three specialists who are here to inform us and educate us. And, you know, they say education is power, right? Or knowledge is power. Well, we're about to be empowered about this disease called COVID-19. Thank you so much once more for visiting us today. And I welcome you all to our program. Now, the first person we're going to start with is my sister, Dr. Laverne Bent.
Hello, everyone. I want to say it's really a pleasure to be here today. And it's really fun to be introduced by my little brother. And I'm an associate professor of anesthesiology, not medicine, unfortunately, but that's okay. Today I'm really going to look at the biblical basis for some of our public health rules. And the reason I started doing this is, there was so much information about the pandemic coming out, and around February 17th, can you hear me? Okay, so around February 17th of 2020, there was a huge conference in a church in France. We usually don't think of churches of France as a very religious place. But there was a mega church in France near the German border, and they have a yearly international conference. They had about 2,500 attendees. And somebody in that group had recently been diagnosed with COVID-19, whether they knew it or not. After that group ended, that conference ended, in that region of France, there had been 0 cases, and there had only been 12 cases in the whole of France until then. 2 weeks later, almost following the book, the first person was diagnosed who was not from that area, and that person was a family member of that church. Within 1 month, there were over 5,000 people who had been diagnosed with COVID-19. So even given all this evidence, in the United States, there was a choir practice in Washington State where multiple people, there were 61 choir members, but after that, about 30 people got sick and 2 died. In Korea, there was also a mega church where a Chinese woman who was one of the first infected went to church, and that church alone was responsible for several thousand deaths, several thousand infections in Korea. Even given all this evidence, I found it really, really concerning and just baffling that there were so many pastors in the United States who were telling their congregations that this was a hoax, or that it wasn't important, or that God was going to protect us. And I asked myself, are they right? Is there a biblical basis for some of these rules that public health specialists were proposing? Now, I could go on for an hour because my brother knows I really, really like to talk. So I'm just going to get to the meat of it right now. There are about 6 major rules, and I'm going to tell you the text where I find that these public health rules are supported by scripture. And then we can read those texts later on, but it will take too much time to really do that right now. But first of all, we have to understand that God wants us to be healthy. Right? We understand that. And God has also given us rules. We know we have the 10 commandments that govern moral rules, but God has also given to the world very strict physical rules, which are very hard for us to break. For example, nobody is going to stand at the top of a 10-story building and jump off reciting scripture and expect that when you hit the bottom, you're still going to be alive. Or if you're driving a car and you drive 150 miles an hour around the corner, even if you're playing gospel music, you're still going to crash. So the physical rules are preeminent, and we need to respect them. And God gave to his people physical rules that were so far ahead of their time at the time that if the world had followed some of those rules, we would have avoided a lot of pandemics. So the main text that I'm going to share with you, number 1, in Leviticus 13, it talks about early diagnosis. It talks about if you see even a small a small sore on your head, you can go to see the priest. I think we can advance the slides up to that one. We can keep going with the slides until we get to those 7 rules. Right, correct. So we know that our world is not perfect, but the physical rules are there and we need to respect them. So early diagnosis, in Leviticus, it says very clearly, if you have a very small sore, go present yourself to the priest. So this is a very important part of us, recognizing symptoms and recognizing we need to diagnose. Number 2, quarantining. Is that a biblical principle? In Leviticus 13:4, you'll see very clearly that it says while that person who has a sore is being investigated, they are to be quarantined away from other people, even if it hasn't been proven that they have a disease. So then number 3, if they're found to be positive for that disease, Numbers 12:15 shows very clearly they are to remove themselves from the camp and they're to be isolated outside of the camp. Social distancing in 2 Kings, you stay far away from people who have diseases. There are many texts that show that someone who has a discharge, for example, everything that that person touches must be burned, and anybody who touches anything that that person touches has to take a bath and wash their clothes, in some cases even shave their beard. Now, we know that also there's no respecter of persons. So just because you're a very wealthy person, you're a very rich person, or you're a leader, doesn't mean that you're immune from some of these rules that God gave. So in 2 Chronicles, we find the story of King Uzziah. He was the king, but he developed leprosy. And it says very clearly there, he lived in an isolated house for the rest of his life. And in terms of face covering in Leviticus 3:45, it said 13:45. I'm sorry, that's incorrect. In Leviticus 13:45, it says a man who has leprosy must cover his face up to his mustache and must also go around telling people that he is unclean. We all know that. We've all heard all these in stories. There's lots, it's very, very important. We talk about hand washing. We talk about washing utensils that are used. These are very, very basic public health principles. Leviticus 13:34, for example, 15:7 and 8, all of those discuss the importance of people who are in contact with people who have infectious diseases, discharges, or leprosy, that they must wash everything. They must wash themselves. They must wash their beard. They must take baths. They must wash their clothes. And lastly, most importantly, scripturally, it is the spiritual community who lead out. It is not simply the government. The spiritual community, God gave that responsibility. Now you'll find also, I didn't add this to my list, but in Luke 17, I found it very interesting, the story of the 10 lepers. When the lepers came to Jesus, you'll see it says in that text, when Jesus came to a certain city, 10 lepers met him and they stood afar off. And now we know Jesus touched a lot of people to heal them. But interestingly enough, in this story, he followed the rules of social isolation, not touching somebody who has a potentially or unknown infectious disease. And he did not touch them. He told them, go show yourself to the priest, following the rules that were known. And as they went, meant they were healed. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention, that all of these basic public health principles that we follow are already in the Bible. Can we see the last slides to follow after that? The slide after that one. So how did Christians handle pandemics through the ages? Did we find that they respected this? If we continue on, we'll find, can I get the next slide, please? We'll find that Martin Luther, he respected these rules and said he would avoid places and persons where he's not needed in order to not become contaminated. Next slide. Next slide, please. Some of the founders of the US public health system were Christians. As Adventists, we know about John Harvey Kellogg, who was one of the pioneers of health in the United States and in the Adventist church. And he agreed that it is God who gave his people the principles of sanitation, hygiene, and quarantine against the spread of disease. Next slide. Next slide, please. So some preachers said to spurn public health warnings is not faith. I found this statement very powerful because many people say, I'm going to go to church because it's church and I'm going to worship God, and no disease is going to come near me because that's what God has promised. But in a way, God has promised that the pestilence won't come near you because he's given us rules to avoid them. So the examples of pastors defying stay-at-home orders and holding packed services, telling their congregants they cannot become infected if they pray, or insisting that God will protect his church, I think that those are principles that we absolutely have to shun. Because we do know that these large gatherings have become super spreading events. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So I put this in the context of deceptions of the last days, that the deceptions that Jesus talks about are not simply spiritual things, but if you are deceived into believing that you can flout God's laws of nature and you become sick, then you have become just as deceived as somebody else who might be disobeying a spiritual rule. So let us reject these deceptions. Let us understand that many of these principles are here for our good, and they're all supported by biblical principles. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laverne. Pastor, we didn't decide on this if we're going to entertain questions after each individual presenter or wait until the end.
We will wait until the end so that we can get the presentations through.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Are we gonna have a song, or are we going to go right into the next presenter?
Right. Brother Keith, do we have a song already?
Pastor.
What was that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, go right ahead, and then we will have the next presenter.
Okay.
Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart feel lonely and long for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, a constant friend is he. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. I sing because I'm happy, and I sing because I'm free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. He watches me. His eye because I'm free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know, yes I know, His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. He watches me. He watches. He watches me. Oh, He watches me.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Yes. Elder Ray, just a reminder, we want to remind individuals that you're able to write questions in the chat. We have individuals who will take note of those questions. So if, as the presenters are presenting, you have questions, write them in the chat so that they can be registered. We have individuals who are assigned to take note of those questions so that we can recall them later. Go right ahead, Dr. Ray.
Well, our next presenter is Dr. Ajoa Smalls Manti. Before she comes on, I just wanted to let some of our visitors know that the reasons why you're seeing all these flags in the background is that today was our cultural day. So everyone was representing their culture, the country where they came from during the Sabbath hours. And that's why you're seeing all of these flags from all over the Caribbean. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Dr. Joes.
Hello, how are you? I'm Dr. Audra Smalls-Monte, and like was said in my introduction, I did HIV research, HIV vaccine research for 10 years, and I'm also a physician now where I practice psychiatry, and I also work with ABC News, writing about COVID and other scientific topics. So I thought I could talk a little bit more about the vaccine and how it was developed so quickly, its efficacy, and about any of the other concerns people might have. So, just to give you all a little bit more background into myself, I decided to do vaccine research after the anthrax scare that happened back in 2001. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but that was scary to me as a child or as a teenager, having to open your mailbox and open your mail very carefully. And after that, I said, you know what, if there's ever an epidemic or a pandemic, I want to be a part of fighting that. So that led me to go ahead and get a PhD in doing vaccine development research. So when the pandemic came around again, and they said, we hope to have a vaccine by the end of the year, I thought, wow, that'll be very, very quick. But the fact that we have a vaccine by the end of the year, I was not surprised when they had that. And that is for several reasons. The first thing is that in 2003, the first SARS epidemic came that started in Asia, and there weren't as many cases here in the US. But ever since that happened 18 years ago, scientists have been working towards a vaccine for SARS. That was SARS-CoV-1. We're with SARS-CoV-2 right now. And scientists have been working on the technology in the two vaccines that has been approved in the US also for a very long time as well. And so one thing I would say is, like, this isn't the vaccine isn't new. It's not all of a sudden, how do we have that? We've been working towards this for a very long time. Another reason why we were able to come up with a vaccine so quickly is because technology and science has rapidly advanced. Back, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it would have taken you weeks, months, years to sequence a gene. They can do that in a few hours. And so, that's what they ended up doing. So now when we have the sequence of the virus, we're able to design vaccines and other treatments towards it very quickly. And another thing is that this was a disease, or is a disease, that is affecting the entire world. So everybody wanted to try to fight this. So a lot of governments put a lot of money towards this, and all scientists were mobilized to work on this. My lab that specializes in HIV, and other research groups I was associated, they started working on this as well. Even if you were an HIV lab or this type of lab, people started working on coronavirus and are still doing that today, because we know this is the fight of our lives. So instead of having maybe 30, 100 research groups working on this, you have thousands. And another thing about the development of the vaccine is that the clinical trials were started, and they analyzed the data very quickly with the clinical trials. A lot of times they get the data, it takes a few months, they look at it, but they were reviewing the data step by step as the clinical trials were happening. And that process didn't take years. They were doing that over months. So instead of completing phase 1, taking a year to review it, then starting to enroll people in phase 2 and taking time, they were doing several steps simultaneously, but not moving to the next step until it was deemed safe to do so. And another reason why we have these vaccines, being shipped within a day or two of it being authorized by the FDA, is because the companies started to manufacture the vaccines several months ago, even during clinical trials. This is typically not done because that is a huge financial risk for the companies in case the vaccines don't work or they are not authorized. But because of how much money several governments around the world were putting towards this effort, they could take that risk. If the vaccines didn't work out, they would have lost all that money. They would have to start again. But because they knew getting this vaccine out, if it should work, and a lot of the data from the beginning and from their years of research showed that this could be a very effective vaccine, they started to make it. So we didn't have to wait for authorization and then start ramping up for a couple of months to start production. They were ready to go when it was approved. So right now, the FDA has authorized the use of 2 vaccines, one by Moderna and one by Pfizer-BioNTech. And those 2 vaccines are mRNA vaccines. So how they work is that they are little pieces of genetic instruction that go into your body. They give your body the information it needs to build up its immune defenses. And then that little mRNA degrades very quickly within hours. So this vaccine does not contain any live virus. It's a little piece of mRNA that is degraded within hours, but it gives your body enough time and enough instructions in order to start building an immune response. And an analogy I like to use is the one from Mission Impossible. If you've ever seen the movie where Tom Cruise's character receives instructions for his task, and it says, your mission, if you should choose to accept, is this, the message will self-destruct. That is what the vaccine is. It gives our body the mission, the instructions, and then it self-destructs in hours. So the fact that this is not a live virus, it doesn't contain any of the COVID virus, so you cannot get COVID from the vaccine, and it degrades so quickly, is why it is safe for virtually everybody to take. If you are pregnant, you can take this. If you have allergies, you can take this. If you have autoimmune conditions, You can take this. Again, this is not a live virus. This does not infect you, your cells, or anything like that. Again, when I do want to go back to the point about this vaccine was made, and people say, well, did they do an adequate test? They did. The Pfizer clinical trials and the Mrna clinical trials had over 30,000 people each in their phase 3 clinical trials. They tested people in many different countries of many different ethnicities that are quite representative of the US population. And when we are looking at vaccines and their biggest side effects, because I know that is another question, a lot of the adverse reactions or side effects that you're going to see happen within minutes to about a month within taking the vaccine. So right now it's been about almost 12 months or since the first people started receiving the first vaccine. So, we have a really good understanding of how long, what some of the side effects might be coming up. And people that receive the vaccines and trials are still being monitored as well to make sure that we don't miss anything. Typically, people are monitored for about 2 years. In the past, I was in a vaccine trial myself, and I was monitored for 2 years. So with the COVID vaccine, I think one of the biggest, specifically with the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, there were some pretty high-profile anaphylactic reactions. And recently, the CDC this week came out with a question about, with a study that showed very few people, like 4.5 people out of a million, might have experienced a severe allergic reaction. But again, let's remember that nobody died. Anaphylaxis, allergies to vaccines, to medications are very common, just like they are to food. And with us being aware of these severe reactions can happen, in particular with one vaccine, at every medical site where they're distributing the vaccine, they have the proper tools in order to help you in case you should have a bad reaction. And that's an EpiPen. I myself have allergies. I carry an EpiPen wherever I go. But at the site, they have that for you. They know to call 911 and take you to the hospital. And the thing to remember, again, is that nobody has died from the vaccine, from any bad reactions. But unfortunately, over 2.4 million people have died around the world, and we are very close to 500,000 people dying in America. So, with all that being said, your risk of taking the vaccine is minimal compared to your risk of getting COVID and unfortunately becoming very ill or even dying from that. So I'll leave it for right there, and then we can answer a few bit more questions later on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joe Smalls, Manti, for that presentation.
I can share my screen.
Yeah.
Like.
Are we going to have a song, Pastor?
No, we're not going to have a song. Dr. Smalls, if you go click share screen again and make sure that you click on the screen that has the PowerPoint shown up there, that would be right.
Oh, okay. All righty.
Yeah.
Click on the one that has
the PowerPoint. Yes. No, you're clicking on the white screen, but you should see when you share, stop sharing again and click on share. Take your time. It will be there. You should look below the white screen. You should see your PowerPoint. Once you see it, you click on that box, the smaller box on the inside. And
you want me to click on the whiteboard?
No, not on the whiteboard, on the PowerPoint itself.
Yeah, that's not showing up.
Okay. Okay. You want me to share? I can share your PowerPoint.
Sure.
All right. Just give me instructions. I take instructions very well, right, Dr. Ray?
Okay.
All right.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Dr. Smalls Monte. I'm at Howard University Hospital, and I'm in the intensive care unit. So I would see you where you are very, very ill. Many of my patients over there, 1 foot in the grave and the other on the banana peel, and you can be like that with COVID disease as well. So now that we've gone through some information about God knowing that we were going to have times when there were very infectious and very lethal diseases. He gave us instructions for that. We've spoken we've listened to Audra Smalls-Monte about the safety of the vaccine. Now I'm going to go over some more information that would make you just give you knowledge so that you can make a decision on whether or not you're going to follow the rules for the distancing and the masks and whatnot. Doesn't matter how inconvenient it is, whether you're going to follow the recommendation for the vaccine. Knowledge is power. So we'll go from there. All righty, next slide. So what is the COVID-19 virus? As we were told before, this is not the first time that we've seen this virus. 17 years ago, we did see a type of COVID virus in the Middle East and in Japan, but they did not spread worldwide. That the disease at that time was contained. We know that the coronavirus 19 showed up in Wuhan, China in 2019, and started in Europe, came over here, and now we have new variants or types. When they talk about the mutations, variants, or types, that's what we're talking about. So one of the newer variants, specifically the UK variant, we're very worried about. We know that this variant is about 7 times easier for you to catch or spread, and that older persons, once they get the disease of this new UK variant, they are more likely to die if you compare it to the other older strain that we have been affected by for the past 1 year. And that makes sense. Something that is more used to aggressive in being able to be caught, it makes sense that it would have a higher likelihood of perhaps dying from this disease. Okay, next slide. So how does the coronavirus attack our bodies? This is a picture of the coronavirus, and you see those spikes on the virus in itself. So the virus latches its spikes onto our healthy body cells, and then it multiplies throughout the body, of course, especially the young and the lungs, and it just hijacks healthy cells and takes command and causes havoc. Next slide. So why is it important that we know the facts about COVID-19 disease so that we can protect ourselves? Now, this is a graph from some months ago, but it's still very relevant. Back in the spring, early summer, we know that our rates were of spread of COVID and death. They were very high. Then we put into place these strict containment measures with the social distancing, with the washing of the hands, with the not traveling, just the regular type of mitigating measures that we've had. Then the death rate went down in the fall, but then it soared up again. And that's most likely because of this new UK variant that has been found. And so now we're in trouble again, and that's why the government has to lock down. It's not a matter that's of someone trying to control your life. It's a matter of actually everybody trying to pitch in and save your life and help you to help to save the life of others. Okay, next. Now, who gets COVID-19 virus most often? I think it's very well known, very well publicized that Blacks, Hispanic persons, and persons of other Southern Asian ethnicity have a higher risk of getting the COVID-19 virus. But it's very important. I don't know. I always say to my children and some of my colleagues, I feel kind of bad when people keep saying, "Oh, Blacks and Hispanics, oh, they're more likely to get it, and they're more likely to die." Yeah, they are, because sometimes we don't have that good baseline preventive health as well as those who are more fortunate social, economic status-wise. And so small illnesses that should be contained or not. And then once persons who are Black and Hispanic, especially Black and brown persons, once you get to the hospital, if they look at your insurance, you may be of the group that is less likely to have good insurance. And whether we want to believe it or not, that has an impact on the care. I found that with doing international research with the Society of Critical Care Medicine, when we're looking at patients all over the world, when I'm looking at Howard data, I don't see people dying like flies. And that's just because that's our mission, that, okay, we're going to lose money, but we're going to take care of you. We don't have a very high death rate. And that's just because you come in, we're going to bring you into the hospital. We're not going to tell you to go sit home and try to quarantine yourself. Of course, you probably caught it maybe from somebody at home, and try to make it the best way you can. I think that's important for you to know. Next slide. What health problems make you more vulnerable to catching COVID-19 disease? And we've known this has been very well publicized. Those who are up in age, those with diabetes, high blood pressure, lung problems, cancer, kidney disease, obesity, and smoking. Those are just the persons that we found it to be more likely to have COVID-19 disease and to have more complications from it. All of these illnesses will in some way, somehow kind of lessens your ability to rally back and fight against the disease. And that's why we find it more often in persons with these health problems. Next slide. So what parts of the body are affected by COVID-19? Literally every system that you can think of. We know that the lung is the most common place, but we do know that the heart, the brain, the kidney, the liver, and the blood clotting system are affected as well. Looking at that blood clotting system effect, persons with COVID-19 disease develop a propensity sometimes to clot more easily than regularly. Now you might say, "Oh, that's good. You don't have many problems with bleeding," but it's not good if it gets to the point where your body just forms clots that go to end up in the heart. Well, that's a heart attack. A blood clot to the heart is a heart attack. A blood clot to the lung is what we call a pulmonary embolus. All of these things are very dangerous. Blood clot to the brain is a stroke. And we found it at a more than we would have expected to in persons with COVID-19 disease. But every organ system can be affected. Next slide. So in people with COVID-19, what are the early signs? So we know about the cough, the fever, the headache, you might know about the muscle aches and feeling tired, of course, the shortness of the breath. Diarrhea, nausea and diarrhea can be one of you just come in and that's your main complaint, and bam, COVID disease. And that loss of the smell or taste was just, we just honed in on that as being one of their early signs. I would guess about 3 or 4 months ago. Very important. Next slide. So you can either have mild or severe COVID-19 disease. So if you're like the gentleman on the left and just have COVID-19 tantamount to feeling like you had a real bad case of the flu, okay, you'll do okay. You'll self-quarantine, you'll take your Tylenol, you'll take your vitamin C, and you're more apt to, live and go on. But there are some persons, like the person on the right, where you end up in the ICU on life support. And I think that's why we as healthcare workers are so adamant about you knowing that you may not end up like the person feeling like you have the bad flu. You could end up dead. And in the meantime, having had the COVID virus in and of itself, you could have spread it to others and you can put them at risk as well. I might also mention that even athletes who have contracted COVID disease, they don't just bounce back like it's in a couple of weeks and you're back on the football field. No, some of the people that are in non-athletes, non-professionals, and professionals, it takes a toll on your body. So you may not bounce back and feel just like back to normal with all of your jogging and the rest of your very normal activity that you need to do to stay healthy. So when you get the type of severe COVID, as I said, you could end up on life support and see all the apparatus that the healthcare workers have to use to keep themselves from catching COVID and spreading it to their children at home. And you could be on medicines for shock. Your kidneys could fail. You could end up needing dialysis. I explained before, you could end up with those blood clots, a heart attack, stroke, blood clot to the lung. And being on the wrong side of the spectrum of this disease severity is not a good thing. Next slide. Children and COVID. We go back and forth. Oh, the children don't. Children can get COVID. We found over the last couple of months that children actually walk around with a higher number and concentration of COVID in their nose than the adults, and they could feel perfectly fine. The problem with that is that they're spreading it. They themselves, they have COVID in their nares. They're spreading it to others, but they're not feeling sick. And that's why we've coined the name silent spreaders for these types of children over the last several months. But the children can also get a very severe form of the COVID, where it sets up a chain reaction of inflammation that shuts down all of their organs. So they are not immune to it. Next slide. So that's why we as healthcare workers are so adamant about you trying to stop the spread of the germs that can make you and others sick, wearing your mask. The CDC is now recommending with this UK variant that may become the dominant strain by March, actually wearing 2 masks. And it's just a matter of, it's a thicker barrier. You have to wash your hands very often and know that the virus lives on surfaces we call fomites, like doorknobs and grocery cart handles and other run-of-the-mill things that we touch very often. If another person touches it, they have COVID, you go and touch it, and then, so on and on and on. Covering your mouth when you speak, and then, of course, staying 6 feet apart. Next slide. And so that's why we emphasize helping saving lives and taking the vaccine. Next slide. And I am very adamant about that because we sometimes just think it's just about me. I don't care whether I die. I don't, this and that, making kind of excuses that sometimes don't really fit together. But think of the other people that you could be affecting. I have a love for the Pathfinders. I'm with them, and so when you see the havoc that COVID-19 disease can cause every day, and if you know that there is a way that you could conduct yourself to not be a part of the problem, but a solution of the problem, I'm telling you, we need to take that. Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Norma Smalls Manti. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was very, very informative. And I'm hoping and praying that we've all been educated and empowered by all three of the presentations. And now we will have, Pastor, a season for questions. Okay, now we will have some time. I had sent some of the questions I received, and I guess I can ask them again if they were not kind of like mentioned in the presentations. The first one I see here was there's several COVID-19 vaccines that are on the market. Are there any notable scientific differences between them in terms of their composition and efficacy? I guess, Dr. Yes.
Yeah.
We know.
With the COVID vaccines, there are 2 that are authorized right now in the US, the Mrna and the Pfizer. And those are both mRNA vaccines shown to have about 94 to 95% efficacy in preventing you from getting severe COVID infection. And they are 2 shots, about 3 to 4 weeks apart. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is due to be reviewed on Friday by an independent committee, which will make a recommendation to the FDA about authorizing its use. And that vaccine is an adenovirus vector vaccine. It works a little bit differently, but again, it's a little piece of synthetic, not synthetic, but a little piece of genetic material that instructs your body on how to fight the virus should it see it. And that's only 1 shot. Right now, the efficacy that they observed is 85% in preventing severe infection. And that's also very, very good. And the one thing that we should remember is that the vaccine by Johnson & Johnson was tested when some of these newer variants were around. So maybe that might be a reason why it looks like it has lower efficacy, but 85% is great. It's amazing. We just need usually 60% for vaccines to be approved. So that's still very good. And the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is only 1 shot. But you really don't have a choice at this time which vaccine you get. And there's right now, again, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine will be reviewed. FDA will make its recommendations, but I don't anticipate that there will be any restrictions in who should get it as well.
Very good. I think you've answered this one in your presentation. It says the vaccines have been created in record time. What was different that made the process appear more efficient, and can we trust the process? And I believe you mentioned the fact that we've been studying, our RNA vaccines for many, many years, and also the technology improved to the point where we could do certain things, gene mapping and these things in a very shorter period of time. So I believe that one was answered. So I'll go to question 3. It says, I'm a COVID survivor. Does it matter if I take the vaccine or not?
It does. In the first couple of months after you've had COVID, your natural antibodies are great. They're there, they're very strong, and should be able to prevent you from reinfection. But in some studies, they've shown that those antibodies that you have start to wane, and the antibodies that you develop from the vaccine have been shown to last a little bit longer. So it is still recommended that you get the vaccine, even if you've had COVID. You should wait for, like say you have COVID today, wait about a month to a couple, 3 months until you get the vaccine, because one, you have the antibodies, and your own antibodies will actually may interfere with the vaccine from actually starting to work, So if you have COVID recently, you can wait and should wait a little bit of time before you get the vaccine, but you should definitely get the vaccine.
Great. This was in the chat, and someone wants some clarification. By Dr. Norma Smalls, I believe this was in your presentation. They were asking, do people with comorbidities, are they more susceptible to catching the disease, or just more susceptible to having more severe illness?
Are they more susceptible to catching the disease? Sometimes when you have underlying medical illnesses, your body's ability to fight infections is less. And so in that way, it could end up that you are more prone to getting the disease. And then just think of your heart as a pump. If your heart is a good, strong pump, and the COVID gets in there and tries to have it, it keeps going. Just think if you have normally, though you're ill and your heart is not as strong, you have very bad diabetes that you can't get under control, and say very bad heart disease that you can't get, and the COVID gets there, you're just beating a weak horse. And so, that's it.
Okay, great. Someone wanted to know, what is the connection between blood type and disease severity?
Right now, they have not observed any connection.
They were saying something about the blood type. It was more common in some blood types, but I don't know. I know that we do collect that data for this international study, but I don't. Any blood type has any protective.
Okay. And someone wanted to know if any of the presenters had taken the vaccine. I know I have. I've gotten both shots. People in the emergency department were the first to get it in our institution. Yeah. So I got both shots, and thankfully, I had no side effects. It was actually better than my flu vaccine because that one usually caused so much pain in my arm. But this time I did not have any symptoms. I know some of my colleagues had some mild symptoms of like muscle aches or a headache, or one person had a mild temperature, but it lasted one day, and it was they treated it with Tylenol and they were fine afterwards.
I've had both of the, I've had the first and the booster. Just to know that when you get the Pfizer vaccine, the second one, you usually you may have more symptoms than with your first. I had side effects, but I'm not dead.
And I took the vaccine as well. I work in the emergency room, so I definitely got it. And again, with most vaccines, you might feel a little bit tired, may have a fever. for the first 24 to 48 hours, but that is normal. That is good. That is your body actually building the defenses. So your body is doing what it's supposed to do. That means the vaccine is working. Your body is practicing fighting the infection. And for me, I just had a little bit of soreness in my arm, but it was nothing more than that lasted, for a day. It's nothing worse than if I had done 20 reps with a 15-pound or 20-pound weight. Like that's, whatever I would have from exercising, that's the type of soreness I had in my arm. And I'll take that any day over getting COVID.
Mm-hmm. And there's a question here that says, is vacation recommended for, vaccination recommended for children under 15?
We're starting the trials now. They're starting that just yesterday or the day before yesterday. They just announced that they're going to start the trials of that. So they're looking at that because we do know that children are silent spreaders. So we can't like, look at it and hope that it'll be effective.
Yeah, right now, you won't be allowed to get it if you're under 15, and only the Pfizer vaccine is authorized for children, 16 to 17 years old. But they anticipate that by the summer, they should have concluded trials in children aged 12 to 17, and hopefully an authorization would happen by then.
Here's a question. What role does the 8 laws of health play in the fight against COVID-19? And is that lifestyle sufficient to make me immune to COVID-19 without the vaccine?
No, I'll just answer it. No, it is that lifestyle is not sufficient. You can, when you have a virulent disease like this, it'll help you. Of course, it's always good for you to eat healthy, to exercise, and all of the to take care of your body, no smoking, all of those. So then you're starting off good, but it's not any way, shape, or form.
How about this one? I am a
I wonder if I could.
Go ahead, Lou.
I'm not hearing the person.
Yeah, I'm not hearing you, Laverne.
But of course, all of those things you should do because that will help your body to have a stronger immune system so that if you're standing in the way of a person who just was florid COVID, and coughs on you, your body can fight back. But it's just like was said before, Dr. Lynn said before, if things do happen and if you jump off the building and still a building, you might hurt your leg or something.
Laverne, are you there?
Is she gonna? Maybe
she's there, but she's frozen.
Oh.
I'm not too sure if it's on her end, her internet connection. I see her moving now. Laverne, could you try to speak again? Let me see if you're coming through.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I did want to address that very, very briefly in that as healthy people, very, very healthy people, athletes, etc. In fact, Dr. Fauci mentioned that his daughter's boyfriend, I think, or his daughter, who was very healthy and a marathon runner, that he died of COVID. But the 8 laws of health, I think, do help you strengthen your immune system. And I think in that vein, we also have to think about supplements that can help our immune system become stronger. So for example, most people with dark skin are chronically low on vitamin D, and
I think she was going to say that vitamin D, we normally think of it as helping with our bones and whatnot, but we've now found that it has hormonal effects that helps us with the immune system, your ability to fight off infection. That's been looked into more carefully. So that might be what she's going to say. It's more than what we thought it was. And Black persons, because we have darker skin, we don't absorb as much of the vitamin D from the sunlight. So we have to be careful.
Okay.
And so that's why they're thinking that supplementation, it won't cure COVID disease. Supplementation will at least not put you behind the 8 ball in being able to have everything you possibly can to help your immune system to fight this disease.
Am I back on?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that. I think my internet is a little bit unstable. I also wanted to mention taking supplements like zinc. Zinc, for example, has been shown scientifically to shorten the course of the flu. And so we
Zinc, vitamin B, and vitamin C. Zinc, vitamin B, vitamin C, and vitamin D are those 4 things that we're on it nowadays with the patients that come into the hospital with COVID. All of those support your immune system.
And so that's how they tie into the laws of health. For example, sunshine, fresh air. There's also N-acetylcysteine, which breaks down in your body into glutathione. And that's supposed to be also a helpful immune booster. So I just wanted to mention those things. And of course, a good diet with lots of healthy fruits and vegetables.
Just to follow up, Dr. Ray, on that same question on the immune system, I have heard one medical person said that, sometimes your immune system can be so robust that it reacts to the virus and end up, causing the person to die. Is that a possibility where your immune system overreacts? Resulting in death?
Yes, that's the basis of what we called multiple organ failure in medicine. It's your body fighting the disease, and it's like on steroids, goes wild, and then it attacks. You start off with a pneumonia, and you end up with your heart shutting down, your kidneys, blah, blah, blah. But however, that it doesn't equate that you can overdo it, too much with your eating and living that lifestyle that supports your immune system. It's just one of the things that we now know the last 30 years or so that the body sometimes just goes awry.
Also, if I could mention, sometimes as Adventists and also sometimes as maybe, let's say Caribbean people, we tend to have a big dependence upon herbs and herbal solutions. And let me say that while herbal solutions are going to be very helpful, for example,
sometimes the herbs have been found to have detrimental effects. So you do have to be very
cautious, right? So I wanted to mention that there are some people who tend to depend on these herbs. And so when you get sick, you make a nice brew and you think, okay, that's going to take care of it. And you sit at home getting sicker and sicker until you are sort of past the point where you can be helped. So it's important to do things in moderation and to use common sense. So if you know that you've contracted the deadly disease and your symptoms are progressing, then it's important to go to the hospital. There are antibody infusions now that are available that are very, very helpful in terms of treatment. And people like Dr. Smalls, who will really go the extra mile to make sure they do best to give you the very best care. So I think those things have to be done in moderation. Those brews are very helpful to strengthen your immunity, but sometimes they can be harmful when used incorrectly. And of course, the supplements are helpful, but they have to be used correctly.
I think we have a few more questions in the chat. Dr. Ray, are you able
Yes,
to see
I'm
that?
looking at it. Someone was asking about should we take vitamin K to help absorb the vitamin D?
I don't know. I'm not. No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of it. I hadn't heard of
I
it.
say no. The answer to that is no.
Yeah.
Vitamin K is a very, very
We lost you again, Laverne.
I know calcium, magnesium. I think the person who's asking the question may be thinking like that. There's calcium, magnesium.
Yes.
But where did the vitamin K?
So like calcium, magnesium, zinc, vitamin D, those are, a couple of the essential vitamins that we need to make sure we're taking enough of. Here's a question. Why do people still get COVID-19 after the vaccine?
So the vaccine, the endpoints for efficacy, what they were looking at was how bad of an infection they prevent you from getting. So you can still, like all vaccines, the purpose is really, you want to prevent the infection, but you really want to prevent serious illness. So what, again, they were able to find is that these vaccines are able to prevent you from getting very serious illness, but it may not prevent you from getting COVID at all, but your body is able to fight it when it gets it. And another thing is that it takes a while for your body to build up its immune defenses. It takes about a week to 2 weeks for the antibodies to start to build up. So even if I got vaccinated today, I can be exposed to COVID and still get it because my body hasn't even had a chance to build up its antibodies on its own.
Dr. Ajoa, I want to make sure that, they got it, because I heard you, because there are some individuals who feel that the COVID vaccine is a shield. Can't touch this, right? But what it is that it allows your immune system to respond more efficiently and more effectively to the virus. Am I correct on that?
It does. You can still be exposed to it. You can still catch it, and you are more likely to be asymptomatic. And being asymptomatic is almost good for you, but could be worse because you don't know you're sick and you could go around spreading it to people and none of you even have a suspicion that you're sick. So again, the vaccines are very effective. And again, for some people, it prevents them from getting infected at all. But in the studies, they were looking at how much of a bad infection does it prevent. So you can still have it, but be asymptomatic. So you still, even after getting the vaccine, need to keep wearing your mask, keep, social distancing, because COVID is still very prevalent in our society right now. It's still in high numbers and your risk of exposure is still very great. So again, the vaccine protects you, but another thing is that it doesn't necessarily protect somebody else. Okay, it's like studying for a test. If I study for the test, I can do well. My studying for the test is not going to help my classmate also pass the test for themselves. Okay, there is something that's called herd immunity. And it's kind of like, okay, the more people that are studying and we're all in this together type of thing. And that is what we're moving forward towards by more people having the vaccine, but it really, we're not there yet. And it really is important for everyone to get the vaccine themselves to prevent themselves from dying. Like at 100% at this point has prevented people from dying from COVID, but it's not going to 100% prevent you from catching it, maybe being a carrier and spreading it to someone else. It should eventually, as more people get it, because you'll just have less virus in you. And so if you have less virus in you, you're less likely to spread it, but we're not there yet.
Okay. Just want to assist you here, Dr. Ray, with some of the questions that I'm seeing in the chat here. And we want to encourage you to use the chat to type out your questions. And the reason for that, we, sometimes we have issues with persons unmuting, and then, we're not able to hear what the presenters are saying clearly or responding in time. So we want you to make sure that you put your questions in the chat and we will read them off. So 2 questions here I'm going to throw at you, doctors. One, somebody's asked if they missed their first shot, right? They had their first shot, but they missed their second shot for the prescribed date. Does it mean that they have to restart the wheel, or can they take a shot after? And secondly, somebody's concerned about the discomfort. So they're asking, can they take Tylenol before or after their vaccine shot?
Well, the data now is that before they were saying, don't miss more than a couple of days after you're supposed to get the second shot, but now they're saying just go ahead and get your second shot. Of course, if you're supposed to get it 4 weeks later and then you go to 6 months later, maybe you have to start again, but certainly go ahead and get it. And of course, just like with the flu, they recommend with the flu that you take ibuprofen like 12 hours before, and then for a day afterwards to cut down those.
So I would say that for the vaccine, you can, if you don't get it that day, right now they're ideally scheduling you within 4 days of when you should be getting that next dose. But as we're seeing in the UK, where they have wanted to extend the time so they can get more people the first dose, they're finding that the vaccine is just as efficacious and even working maybe even a little bit better as people have more time. Although again, the clinical trials were done for the Pfizer and Mrna vaccine for you to have it within 3 to 4 weeks, and they were 95% effective, which is great. So try to stick to that time. But if you can't, get it as soon as you can. Again, I would do that. And actually just about pre-medicating, anti-inflammatory medications like Motrin, ibuprofen, naproxen, like those theoretically could blunt your immune system from working. So right now it's not recommended that you take it before, but if you are not feeling great afterwards, maybe you can take Tylenol for your headache or a fever or so, but I would not say that you need to take it before. Just wait and see what happens. You may need it, you may not. And if you need it after, it'll work.
Okay. Just some other questions here with regards to somebody's asking, can they cross the vaccine brand like the Moderna and the Pfizer? If they took one in the first shot, the Moderna, can they take the Pfizer in the next shot? How do they ensure that you're actually getting the same shot? Maybe if that is needed, and somebody wants to make sure that there's no piglets in the vaccine. How can we talk about that? They don't want, if there's any animal in the vaccine.
Oh, okay. So right now, it is not recommended that you cross the vaccines. You get a card when you get your vaccine, just like we've all gotten lots of vaccines. If you were born after the 1940s, you have gotten probably 2-3 dozen vaccines in your life. So this isn't anything new. And, at least in America, we have a vaccine card, and they give you a new vaccine card with this, and it has the vaccine that you took. So you're able to remember which one you got, and you sign up, to go to the same place to get that vaccine. So they have a record of that. Right now, there are studies being done to see if they can, maybe if you got Pfizer, then try getting Mrna the next one, but those studies have not been completed. So it's not recommended testing. And actually, I don't think that most places would allow you to just hop wherever and mix them just because of how tightly things are being controlled. There are no animal products in the vaccines.
Okay. Question. Again, I know you mentioned Mrna, you mentioned Pfizer vaccine, and also the Johnson & Johnson, but we have some folks here who are from third world countries, and they are being told about, I think, AstraZeneca and our COVAX. I don't know if they're one in the same, right? How different are they from the Mrna, Pfizer, and the Johnson & Johnson, if any different?
The AstraZeneca vaccine is like the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. It is 2 shots, but it's the same technology, and that is adenovirus viral vector that they put a little piece of DNA, which is instructions for your cells on how to fight the virus.
There was a question about taking the vaccine if you have sickle cell anemia.
You actually, for people that have sickle cell, cancer, autoimmune diseases like type 1 diabetes or lupus, or any, even pregnancy, like you're almost a little bit immunocompromised in pregnancy, you should definitely get the vaccine and those are the special conditions that they are talking about. Right now, you are being prioritized in many of the states because you are more likely to get a severe infection and possibly die from COVID.
This one, I am a COVID survivor. Does it matter if I take the vaccine or not?
I would get it. Just to go back to what I was saying before, right now, within the first couple of months after the infection, you have a lot of antibodies. But right now, studies are showing that the natural antibodies people have don't last as long as the antibodies generated from the vaccines. So while you are kind of protected, we don't know how long that will last, but the immune response from the vaccine is better.
And how long is the protection from the vaccine?
That we don't know because the vaccine has only been developed since March, and they're still monitoring it. And the biggest concern scientists have right now are about the new strains that are coming, the new variants that are coming out. The fact that we're seeing with some of the vaccine trials in other countries, like in South Africa, where their variants were more prevalent, the vaccine, AstraZeneca didn't work, or another vaccine didn't work as much. We're thinking, okay, we might have to tweak the vaccine a little bit to deal with certain strains, which we do every year with the flu vaccine that so many of us always get. So we might have to get a booster every year. We're just not 100% sure, but they are doing studies on that right now.
Great. And when someone says, when someone is said to be COVID-19 positive and asymptomatic, does it mean that the person's immune system is effective in fighting the virus?
It has been pretty effective, yeah.
Well,
But
so
not
you
100%
have COVID.
because you have COVID, but at least you're not like really, really sick. So it tried and it, kind of effective. But again, not 100% because you still caught COVID.
And also, it really depends upon how much of the virus you were hit with. I mean, were you in the house with someone, and you just like every day you were just getting hit with the virus, or is it just a small amount when you were at work or someplace else? But the amount of virus that hits your system has to do with how sick you get also.
Mm.
Mhm.
Here's a question, sorry. Here's a question regarding how long should a person who has the vaccine wait and is having swollen lymph nodes? Is that, this question came up on Wednesday's prayer meeting. Some people with who get the vaccine have swollen lymph nodes. Does it affect the mammogram?
Well,
So a few, that is rare. Some people do get some swollen lymph nodes, but they are not saying that you should not go if you were scheduled and it's hard to get that appointment. Let your doctor and technician know so that if they happen to see something that looks abnormal, then they are like, okay, it might be due to the vaccine, but everyone doesn't get swollen lymph nodes. That's, you know, not that common. So still get your mammogram when you're scheduled to get that. And again, if there's any question, then they'll call you back, they'll rescan you, or do whatever else they need to do to make sure they answer the question correctly. If you have the luxury of maybe scheduling your appointment for a few weeks before your COVID vaccine or a few weeks after, that's fine, but I would not I would not skip, your mammogram or skip your COVID vaccine on account of the other.
Okay, great.
Adjoa, I wonder if I can jump in real fast and ask Adjoa a question. There are lots of videos running around the internet that people are passing around wildly. And there are 3 questions I want to ask her based on these videos. And I'm just asking because I want her to get the information out there. Number 1, there are lots of videos saying that the vaccines have fetal parts in them. So that's number 1 to address. Number 2, there are some reports of people getting Bell's palsy, which is a paralysis of the face. And there are several videos out there with people showing their faces deformed, as they're saying as a result of getting the vaccination. And thirdly, there are also videos out there saying that Bill Gates is using these vaccinations to kill people from Africa because we have to get rid of 3 billion people off the planet. So as someone who's involved in the industry, do you have any knowledge of Bill Gates' agenda in this area? So those are the 3 questions.
Okay, I'll start with the last because no, like that, I don't know Bill Gates personally, but as evidenced by a lot of the work that he has done and his support for research and trying to help things, I do not think that is his goal, and it would be very hard to do that. In fact, very few African countries actually have the luxury of having the vaccine right now. And you can see that many Africans are fine, they're safe. They're only 4.5% of the deaths due to COVID. They've been able to control it a lot better than we are here. So no, they don't even have a vaccine yet. It's in South Africa. I'm not sure of the other countries yet, or if they are in the other countries yet. The first question was about fetal parts, and no, there are no fetal parts. In the mRNA vaccines, you have the mRNA, that's a genetic material, but that can be synthesized in the lab, and there are some other stabilizers in there that are in every single vaccine and medication that you take, like a little bit of certain types of salt and sugar compounds, just not a lot, it's not going to mess you up. These are in every single medication and thing that you take. So no fetal parts, no human parts. And then the second question was?
Bell's palsy, the incidence of Bell's palsy.
Okay. I don't know the numbers for Bell's palsy, but that has not been one of the severe adverse reactions that have been highly reported, although Bell's palsy can be a consequence of this vaccine and any other vaccine and any other viral illness that you get. So again, with Bell's palsy, it's a condition that you have a little bit of facial drooping, and that can be effectively treated. It typically goes away after a few weeks. When you start, if you notice something odd, go to your the hospital immediately so you can start getting treatments, so you can have a swift recovery.
I had read that the incidence of Bell's palsy in people who received the vaccine is essentially the same as in the general population. There's really effectively no relationship between the two, the vaccine causing Bell's palsy.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, again, even though people are getting the vaccine, we're still people living our lives. So unfortunately, things happen to us in life, just living life. So somebody can have the vaccine and the next day, unfortunately, have a car accident or have a heart attack that they would have had anyway, or, that doesn't mean that it is from the vaccine, just because it happened proximally to it. But if anything, like any adverse bad effects happen, doctors report that to the CDC. You can report that as well. And those are investigated very thoroughly.
Someone wants to know if are there any natural remedies that are effective against COVID-19? None, right? None that we know of. And there's a question here that says, why does the vaccine have to be kept at such a low temperature?
It has to be kept at a low temperature for the Pfizer and Mrna vaccines because those are made out of the messenger RNA, mRNA, which is a fragile genetic material. So, that can quickly degrade in your body within hours, so that you have to keep it at very cold temperatures to keep it stable. But actually, they're doing more studies and finding that they might be able to keep it at less cold temperatures, which is better ultimately for distribution, especially to places that don't have the freezer capabilities that other places have.
So Gabriel is asking, should we wear 2 masks? I've been hearing about that lately.
Well, it has come up over the last several days. The CDC has come up with the recommendation that when you're in an area where you really think there's a higher possibility of your catching COVID, that 2 masks would be a good idea. Maybe a medical grade one and then your regular one on the outside. And it's just because that any material, any cloth or paper mask, there are holes. It's not just completely tight. If you wear 2, then you're more apt to have less space for the viruses to creep in and get to you. So just though in the areas where when you're in areas where you think this is a little higher chance of me getting COVID, like if you're in a crowded grocery store or something like that, or you're outside or you're in some enclosed space with people that may have a higher likelihood. For instance, when I'm in the hospital, and I don't even go near the elevators too much. I used to use the elevators with where they sometimes transport the patients. Now I don't at all. I'm saying, well, somebody just coughed and just released all of these viruses like 15 seconds ago, and then here I come walking up like that. You just have to think in that you're not crazy. and scared and have all this fear, but you use your common sense. God gave us common sense. And a lot of times when we just use that good old common sense knowledge, we'll go far.
Someone
So
says,
tell you, like here with the if you have a regular mask on, there might be a little bit of room here. So that's why they are recommending a second mask that is a cloth mask that you put over that can hold it at the sides a little bit better. They also say that if you tie the sides of the mask,
Tighter.
like so,
And it's
and
tighter.
it can be a little bit tighter here. But if you're doing two masks, you want it to be a surgical mask and then a cloth mask over it, not two surgical masks. Ideally not two cloth masks, a surgical mask and a cloth mask. But, most importantly, make sure the mask is covering your nose really tightly and, covering your mouth. Here, like we test for COVID here, COVID lives there, okay? And your mouth, it's there as well, but it's really up there in your nose. So make sure that is covered to prevent you from catching it and from spreading it as well.
someone asked about what about covering your eyes?
That is definitely helpful if you're in an area where you're exposed to a high concentration of virus and there's likely to be some splash coming into your face, or like and they recommend that for doctors, like if you're intubating, like Dr. Bruce would have to do that. But I think for the average person, that has not been recommended by the CDC and just your day-to-day. But if you are in a area where you're likely to be in more close contact, more exposure, wear your goggles. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
The point I think on that is to not touch your face. That's the important point, to keep your hands off your face.
I had read an article regarding the wearing of mask, and they were essentially saying just like a 1% defect in the seal of the mask decreases the efficiency of the mask by about 50%. I'm not sure about those numbers, but it makes sense, that it's so important to have a correct seal on the mask, because you're not doing yourself any favors if you're just haphazardly putting the mask on. Someone says, I work in a hotel industry. Do I have to wear 2 masks?
A hotel where you would have people coming in from all over the world, and there's no control with that. I think that would be wise for you to do. And just wearing your glasses is good also. One time, some months ago, I thought they found that you can contract the virus through the eye membrane. So that's important. And now in medicine, the guidelines are much stricter over the past several months. All of us, all physicians have to wear the shields or some type of goggles. I wear glasses. Protect your eyes.
So someone said this question, which is a very common question: can mask not affect your breathing after long periods of wear? And my shifts are 12 hours. And so in the ED, we're fully gowned and wearing mask for 12 hours straight. And it does not affect your breathing. And this has been shown over and over again, but it's a common misperception. But it does not affect your breathing. Any comments from the panel?
Well, you're still getting oxygen to breathe and to, take care of your body so that you can live. So you're still getting the oxygen. I think there was some information that was going around that if you had COVID, you were rebreathing the same air over and over again. Wear the mask. Wear the mask and prevent the droplets and the aerosol from getting into your nose and otherwise, and giving you COVID and making you die.
Yeah, and I'll just say that I know we have to get used to wearing it, but we've gotten used to wearing clothes. A lot of people will say we have to wear, some undergarments. A lot of women will complain are not as comfortable, but like we get used to wearing it. And so I would, babies have to wear diapers. And I know that sounds, I'm not making light of it. Like there are a lot of things that we've had to get used to wearing, and now we don't even think about it. But it's for our safety. Like I've been wearing glasses most of my life. Initially when I wore it, it was something weird, but now it's become something. So I know like we're still getting used to it. It's been, almost a year. But if something so simple is able to really prevent us or really help effectively prevent us from getting a deadly disease, I say it's worth it, and hopefully we'll feel more comfortable. But some professions wear masks all day, every day, and dentists, surgeons, like my mom, like they have to wear that all the time, and so they've construction workers. So it's just about getting used to it, but it is very important right now.
I think the only people who might have a significant problem is if you already have a pulmonary dysfunction. If you have poor lung function, then wearing a very tight sealed N95 mask all day might be a little bit difficult. And so it's important to try to find a mask that fits comfortably, that also gives you some protection.
But those are the same persons.
Like if you have like a pulmonary condition, COVID affects the lungs and your breathing, so you're more likely to have a severe
type of COVID
infection and death. So you're the person that needs to wear the mask if you have the asthma, if you have COPD, if you have any of those things. That doesn't exempt you just because the mask is uncomfortable. You more than anyone really need to wear the mask, and like was said, just try to find one that is as comfortable for you to wear as possible. I do want to mention, sometimes people are only wearing the clear face shields with no tight fitting mask. That is not doing really anything for you. You really do have to wear a mask that has a tight fit over your nose and a seal around your mouth.
There's a question in the chat. Is it true that having COVID, that after having COVID, your breathing changes?
Yes, long-term effects of COVID. You can get the healing process and get a scar tissue from the COVID infection. So that's what I was saying. Some people that are very healthy baseline and they have COVID and get over it, but they say, I didn't snap back. I was not running back on the track or, doing my 2-mile jog back in a week or so, because it has long-lasting effects on many organs. In fact, you get that foggy brain where they just can't. You're thinking, but you're not thinking normally. So it's not a joke. We may know people will say I had it and I'm fine and I'm walking. But if you get the one that's bad, and then you're in the hospital and your family cannot come to visit you, and it's not a joke.
Mm-hmm. There are two questions on herd immunity. One was, if 80% of my community has been vaccinated or was infected prior, can I rely on herd immunity and don't have to be vaccinated? And the other one was like, how far are we away from herd immunity?
So herd immunity will be great when we have it. We're not there yet. Only 13% of Americans have received their first shot of the vaccine. Right now, we know the vaccine protects you from getting very, very sick and dying. We believe it will reduce transmission, but again, we don't have enough data to say that will happen yet. But based on all the other vaccines that we've been having in the past, eventually when enough people get the vaccine, the virus might try to infect somebody, but then it can't because that person has a vaccine. It tries to go and infect somebody else. It can't. And so the virus eventually dies out. So you have less and less of the virus just around. But again, remember, if you don't have the vaccine, you are always susceptible to infection. So, you know, we can get to a point where we'll say there will be less people that have the infection, and then you're less likely to catch it because less people will have it. But right now, we're not anywhere close to that. And honestly, with these new variants popping up, even some people that have the vaccine right now, it may not be enough if some of the variants are able to, what we say, escape the vaccine. Like the reason why there isn't a vaccine for HIV is because it mutates so rapidly that we are not able to create something that will fight the HIV that you have tomorrow. You know, it can fight the HIV that you have today, but not the HIV that you'll have tomorrow or that somebody else will have tomorrow. And that's why we have to get the flu vaccine every year, because it can keep mutating. So right now, we're only 13% people have the vaccine. We need 80% for herd immunity, but even now we're seeing these variants pop up, and for the current vaccines, they might escape it. So right now, the best thing that you can do is get the vaccine to protect yourself.
The herd immunity, that concept was brought out by one of our former president's friends, and it was all a ploy to try to not pay much attention to the COVID, spend the money and the resources and put in all the organization efforts. So yes, you know, you stay.
Here's one that says, is the vaccine still considered an experimental drug?
It's authorized for emergency use. And so with that, the FDA is saying, we believe that even though we still need more long-term data, because the risk of not having this vaccine is even greater, and we see enough data to say that it's safe right now, we are saying it can be approved. But within a couple of months, they would, because they have enough timeline for the data from this vaccine trial, they will be able to say it is approved. Like right now, authorization versus approved. To the lay public, it doesn't mean too much, but it just means that they have even more data to look at. But again, there are other vaccines that work in similar manners, like the Ebola vaccine, so that have been out for longer periods of time. So, you know, based on, you know, those safety is what they can say, all right, these are, you know, likely very safe for pregnant women and for people that are immunocompromised, and we can go ahead and give it to people. And they've been doing research on these types of vaccines and for this coronavirus for a very long time, since the first coronavirus came. I will mention that the lady, Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett at NIH, who is the lead scientist of for the NIH's vaccine effort for the Mrna vaccine, was somebody that I went to college with, and very sharp, very bright Black woman who has been working on coronavirus vaccines for a very, very long time. And so when this came, she was ready to lead her team. So again, that gives me even more pride as a Black woman that another Black woman and someone that I know personally was the lead in helping develop this vaccine.
Also, the United States putting out new medications, we are very, very, very safe. We have a system of redundancy. We do a lot of testing. I remember some of the HIV medications, Europe had already put them out, put out certain medication because so many people were dying and we were still testing. The public had an outcry and said, okay, probably testing is enough. We're dying. Can we have this medication? So I really don't think with this vaccine, we need to worry about the experimental type of concerns. But in general, the United States is quite careful with new medications in the trials. Quite, almost to a fault, some people would say.
Okay.
That are dying.
All right. Just want to reiterate on these things. I know we want to finish before 6:30. I don't want you guys to become exhausted, answering questions. All right. But I'm seeing a question that keep recurring, and I know that you have answered these questions, Dr. Ajoya, where persons want to know the specificity of the ingredients in the vaccine. There are people who have convinced individuals that fetus are in this vaccine, animals are there, pigs are in there, and all of that, So could you speak to that issue? And again, there are persons who are saying there are reports there that people have died because they have received the vaccine. Could you differentiate between dying of the vaccine, dying after the vaccine, right? That kind of a thing, because they're not interchangeable.
Yeah. So in the vaccine, you have your mRNA, and then you have what are stabilizers, which are common in basically most medications that you take. Those are lipids, those are salts, those are sugars. So those are what are in the vaccine. These are not derived from any animals or from peoples. In terms of, again, in medical research studies, they investigate any side effect, any death, anything that happens. And to date, of the over 100 million people around the world have received the vaccine. There have been no deaths linked to the vaccine. Just because somebody might die from after they had the vaccine does not necessarily mean that the vaccine caused it. Like, somebody can get the vaccine today and unfortunately, like I said, have a heart attack, but if they were predisposed, they had coronary artery disease, they've already had 10 heart attacks, and this is their 11th, and unfortunately they succumb. It's not necessarily from the vaccine. Or, just as saying, Audra ate a pickle and then she was in a car accident. Pickles can cause car accidents. It's not necessarily correlated. So again, if anything bad happens to anybody, they are investigating that, they're looking at it, but there has been no evidence to show that the COVID vaccine caused a death. Some of the people that unfortunately died are very, very elderly people that, unfortunately would have died anyway. And that's just the timing of it. But there's so many things that we do in life, but it doesn't mean the thing that we just did related, right before that was the cause of it. So just like people won't say, you had a drink of water and that caused your stroke because you had the water right before you had the stroke. So temporality, like happening around the time, does not mean causality.
All right. Thank you so much, Doctor. You said Ajwa.
Dr. Audra, yes.
Yes, right. Thank you so much. Dr. Ray, your final thoughts on this. Is now 6:25. Personally, I want to say thanks to each of our panelists for coming and sharing. Thank you, Dr. Ray, for leading this discussion. I want individuals to know that, what we have shared here is for information. I would want my members to be informed, right? So that you make informed decision, right? Any medical decision you take, you want to do so with prayer and everything like that. I'm your pastor. I don't get any benefits from Moderna or Pfizer for having this session, and none of these wonderful doctors here, have any interest or investment where that is concerned. It's about our community. It's about our family. I wanted to know even more so that I can make a decision for myself and my family. And so I want to say thanks to everyone for coming and sharing you in this moment. Really appreciate. Laverne, I never knew you were such a theologian, right? You will be hearing from me. Laverne, I love the way you dissected that word right there. Come on now. I really love that. I felt like a preaching moment right there. Dr. Norma Small, thank you. You are an avid pathfinder. And I really, really appreciate that. Ajwa and Dr. Small, mother-daughter team. Oh my goodness.
Girls rock.
Come on, put your hands together for them, right? I'm really proud of you, Ajwa, as a young medical professional. And I hope my young people who are watching, seeing this beautiful young lady of color, right, who is a specialist in virology, can aspire. And you are an inspiration. You are an inspiration, Ajwa. And I want to say thank you very much, Dr. Ray.
I too just want to say thank you so much for coming on board. When Laverne told me that you guys had put this program on at Metropolitan, I was like, wow, we need this here, and I discussed it with the committee, and everyone wholeheartedly was like, oh man, just get them here as quickly as possible. And I'm just so thankful that you all agreed to come on board today. I think that, I'll say it over and over again, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And we need that power, especially with so much misinformation going on around us. And today, the three of you just clarified so many and answered so many questions and informed us and educated us. And we cannot thank you enough for this, because it will empower us. It will help us to make the right decisions. It will help us to be safer and help to protect ourselves more, and hopefully prevent us from getting this disease. We don't know the long-term effects of a program like this. How many people will benefit from it? How many lives will be saved because of it? And maybe one day when we get to heaven, we'll find out that programs like this has helped so many people. So I am so thankful that for you all agreeing to come on board and for helping us out and putting on this program today. Thank you so much. God bless all of you.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Ray. Just want to share something in the chat for those of you who have been asking about vaccination site in Queens. I want to thank Sister Patricia Williams for sharing this information. I put the link there in the chat where you can set up your appointment. I'm in touch with the borough president's office, because as soon as more sites come up, I want to make the information available to you so that you can make an informed decision. I want you to, for those of you who maybe, you have immigration status pending or challenges, right? There are provisions made. I believe you just need to make sure that you walk with an ID, right? That is sufficient, I am told, but I will get more information for you, because I don't want any of my parishioners to feel disadvantaged because of their status. So I'm in touch with the city, I'm in touch with the mayor's office, and I'm trying to get as much information as possible so that you can be informed as to where to go. Elder Mitchell, I know you are on, and just before we go, I want you to say a prayer for this wonderful team of medical professionals who have taken time out of their busy schedule to share with us. The information was valuable, and I want to say thanks again. We could not have paid you. This is valuable information right here. So thank you so much. Elder Mitchell.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. It is certainly appreciative of your presence here, particularly on behalf of the Health and Safety Task Force. I want to say thanks again to each and every one of you. Laverne, it's good to see you. We are contemplating going back into church on a phased-in basis, and it behooves us, each and every parishioner that is on here, that are listening this platform or the other two platforms that we're on, YouTube, maybe Facebook. I want to implore you, get your vaccine. If you're contemplating coming back into church, get your vaccine. Thank you again, everyone. Let us pray. Almighty God, we thank you so much for information that you have empowered these four presenters to present to us. Credible medical information that we need at this time. I thank you, dear God, for what they do. I ask, dear God, that your protection and your presence constantly hover over them. In the work that they do, dear Father, we know the vulnerability. And so, dear Lord, I'm asking you to cover them with your protection, cover them with your love. Bless their extended family and immediate families. And Father, when it's all said and done, as Dr. Ray says, when it's all said and done, when we all gather on the sea of glass, we can talk about all this information and what has saved us unto the day when we can hail you as Lord and King and Savior and go home to reign with you. These mercies we ask in thy name. Amen and amen. Thank you again.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thanks to those of you who joined us from near and from far. Those of you who are from the Caribbean islands, some of you from England, I'm told, that are online. We want to say thanks to you for joining us in this information session as well. So I know Deacon Keith Taylor is on standby just now to come on over and to take us into our Vesper session. Go right ahead, Deacon Taylor.
Thank you so much, Pastor and the group. Let us move over. So I'm going to just play a song to move over to the next section of the program.
Who taught the sun where to stand in the morning? And who told the ocean you can only come this far?